Hey everybody, Chuck Barone here, Thursday, August 25th, 2022. Very interesting day today. Going to be a little bit of a humbling day for me today. But as always, before we start the show, I just want to thank everybody for their support for the videos and the channel. You guys, come through every day, every single day, watching the videos, liking them, your comments, and all the things you guys have done to make this show a success right out of the gate. And I cannot tell you guys how much I appreciate it. And I hope that I'm living up to your expectations. I do the very best I can do every single day to bring you what I think is stuff you need to hear that will help you with your investing and help you build a better future for yourself. And I try to tell you the truth as I see it, without a lot of the rah-rah sensationalizing, prophet of doom, crash every month kind of stuff that a lot of guys do to get people to subscribe and watch their videos. For some reason, that seems to be very attractive, as evidenced by yesterday's rant video, which was our highest rated video in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Anyway, getting into today's show, in the markets today, kind of a weird day. Everybody's waiting on the big stuff tomorrow from Jackson Hole. But the stock market was up today, up small across the board. S&P, NASDAQ, and the Dow all rising. I think that it was helped out a little bit by the employment numbers today. Unemployment statistics coming out, showing still strong job growth here. Less people filing for unemployment they thought. So that gives the stocks a little bit of a bounce because the economy is, according to employment at least, looking pretty strong. The bond market also rallied today. 10-year down 8 basis points to 302. That's more in liking with what the number of the stock market likes. I'm sure they would still rather see it under 3 than over. But to the market, 302 looks a lot better than 310 and rising, right? The 2-year at 3.37. So the spread between the inversion was narrowing a little bit. It looked like the yield curve was starting to flatten out a little bit. Now it's kind of going in the opposite direction again, with the 10-year about 30, or the 2-year about 35 basis points higher than the 10-year as far as yield. And the dollar today, down fractionally, but still the king right now, as other economies are struggling with their currencies, trying to figure out how to get the balance between rates and keeping the economies moving. The dollar is just strong right now, over 108 on the dollar index. Now, when I say strong, I want to emphasize again, I don't really mean strong at the supermarket, which is my measure of how the dollar's doing. When you see the prices of everything, even my wife showed me today, she said, look, here's the old bag of Ziploc bags she buys, 120 bags in the box. Here's the one I bought yesterday, same price, 100 bags in the box. And then now that's called shrinkflation, but nonetheless is inflation. And the supermarket is the true test in my mind. And it really looks like the dollar's relative strength as far as its purchasing power, not doing so great. But all that tells us is the purchasing power of the euro and all the other world currencies is even worse, which is not so great for them. The strong dollar, of course, putting pressure on the metals market. I think metals really want to kind of rally a little bit because they're holding their own against this strong dollar. Both gold and silver up small today. Silver at $17.59 per ounce last I looked. Gold $17.59 last I looked. Silver at $19.35 last I looked. I'm really happy to see silver kind of creeping a little bit higher. I was concerned that it was going to break that support at $19 and test some new lows. Doesn't look like that's in the cards right now. We'll see what happens at Jackson Hole tomorrow. Oil, down day for oil today. West Texas Intermediate settling at $92.65 a barrel, or $92.85 per barrel. Natural gas up small today, $9.76 for their British thermal units. Natural gas has been the huge commodity winner. It's basically tripled, maybe even more than tripled. And I think natural gas still has a ways to go, although I'm having my doubts about Russia completely cutting the euro zone off from natural gas this winter. I think they're going to punish them a little bit, but not to that extent, which will be good for their economies and good for the world economy as well. I think if Russia does cut them off completely, that literally makes them a trading pariah who will, it would take them literally generations to get back to what they were as far as world trading before this Ukraine war. The Bitcoin down small today. Still over 21,500, seems to be consolidating around that number, which is a good sign for Bitcoin. Like silver, I thought they were going to break through support and test lows. Apparently there's a new support above 21,000. That looks good for them. Hopefully they can finish consolidating their support there, shake out the week, and then start their next leg up. In economic news today, the unemployment statistics came out. Let's just face it, guys, the employment situation, if these numbers are even remotely close to the truth, unemployment is just not happening in the U.S. The unemployment rate is at basically all-time lows. We're even below pre-pandemic numbers, although the work participation numbers, the workforce participation numbers are kind of down too, so there's less people in the workforce, adding also, pressure to the job market where there's just more jobs than there are people to fill them right now. At least that's what they're telling us. We'll see where that ends up. But right now, employment, the mainstay of the economy. As evidenced by the title of this video, I got a few corrections to make on some of the things I've been saying on the show. Some are a little easier to admit to than others. But when we started this program, I promised you guys that I would always tell you the truth as I see it. I want you guys to know that I'm not going to be 100% all the time. I'm usually pretty good, and I'm certainly right more than I'm wrong. But there's going to be times like this where I'm going to have to correct some of the stuff I've been saying to bring it more in line with what has been happening in this economy and in these markets. The first correction is on yesterday's video, my rant about these student loan forgiveness program. I guess I kept mixing it up with the Ukraine numbers and kept saying 3 billion, 3 billion, 3 billion, when it's actually $300 billion that this is going to cost. And in my mind, as bad as 3 billion was, well, 300 billion is 100 times worse. I think that that's a topic that's going to be argued. I certainly expect there to be a lot of challenges in court over this designation here. I don't know how one man by fiat can single-handedly just spend $300 billion without Congress and the Senate weighing in, or the House and the Senate weighing in. There's a thing called appropriations in this world. Now, the funny thing is they're actually using COVID emergency powers to try to do an end run around the Congress, saying that, this is part of the COVID emergency. I think they might have I don't care how talented their lawyers are, I think they might have a little bit of a difficult time proving that in court. I also got flamed pretty good by some people who were beneficiaries of this student loan forgiveness. And I'm sorry, guys. The argument they were making is because I'm in real estate, which has been subsidized and supported by the government, I really have no reason to say anything about any of this stuff. Well, I beg to differ. So here's the deal. Any one of you and anyone in the world could have done what I did the last 25 years and spent their time in real estate and mortgage. There was no exclusion. If you wanted to get into business and could pass the tests and get your license, you're in the business. This student loan thing, on the other hand, comparing those two is kind of a diamonds to dog crap argument, because not everybody's going to be a benefit of this wonderful thing of loan forgiveness. I helped my kids pay their tuitions, helped them get scholarships. They stayed here in Vegas to go to school rather than go to fancier schools in California they could have qualified to go to. Would have cost me a whole bunch more. And we did what was prudent to get them their education, but do it in a way they wouldn't be saddled with these colossal debts. Well, guess what? I laid out thousands of dollars. So did they to pay their tuition. They both worked their butts off during school to work and go to school at the same time. Where's the relief for them? Where's the relief for the people who have already paid off their student loans, didn't defer them into infinity? Where's the relief for them? Their money isn't as good as the guys who don't want to pay their loans? I mean, come on, guys. This is not a reasonable thing where it's exclusionary, it's exclusive, it's not inclusive, and it's not for the good of all. It's only for the good of a small segment. Well, sorry. There's an old saying, and I love old sayings because they're typically true. The saying goes like this: he who robs Peter to pay Paul will always have Paul's cooperation. And here we go on this student loans. The beneficiaries of it, of course, they think it's a wonderful, great idea. But the rest of us, the hundreds of millions of dollars, and the taxpayers who are paying this, going to have to pay this bill, well, guess what? No benefit to us, just a bill like always, right? So anyway, that's one of the big corrections. But my most important correction I have to make is on a segment I did, which actually I was completely wrong about, and it cost me a couple hundred subscribers when I was talking about this new money for the IRS. And I was suggesting that, this money was not going to be used to audit people in the middle class. It's more designed to go after the wealthy, which has been the mantra in Congress. Well, much to my chagrin, because, a lot of people hit me hard on that. And I'm not a guy that just says something and forgets about it and never goes back to it. I'm always reading and trying to, improve the information we can provide to you guys every day. And I read an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal today, not by a guy that I'm a big fan of, but by Karl Rove. And I want to read you guys a little snippet of this, okay? Because it's fascinating what he says. He says, "It sounded like an ironclad promise when Jared Bernstein of President Biden's Council of Economic Advisors told Fox News' Neil Cavuto on August 16th that the $45.6 billion in the Inflation Reduction Act to expand Internal Revenue Service compliance efforts will not be spent on increasing audits of anybody making less than $400,000 a year." And that was the mantra. They kept going and going and going over that. Well, let me continue. "IRS enforcement is going to target those well above $400,000, Bernstein pledged. There's no targeting of the middle class." Okay. Neil Cavuto seemed skeptical, asking the White House advisor if he meant everyone under $400,000 in income will not be scrutinized more by the IRS, the deductions analyzed more by the IRS. Bernstein replied forcefully, "They will not be scrutinized more." Well, here comes the interesting part. Bernstein was shading the truth. Other Team Biden members got in on the obfuscation effort, but if you read between their weasel words, which I love that phrase, you can tell that they knew the number of audits on those making less than $400,000 would increase. Okay? An August 10th letter to IRS Commissioner Charles Rettig, Treasury Secretary, I don't know how the hell, Janet Yellen, wrote, "I direct that any," now this is a quote, "I direct that any additional resources the IRS receives from the Act, quote, shall not be used to increase the share," key word, "of small businesses or households below the $400,000 threshold that are audited relative to historic levels." Emphasis added. The commissioner wrote senators on August 4th, promising that the IRS would design, quote, the investment of enforcement resources around Ms. Yellen's directive that audit rates will not rise relative to recent years for households making under $400K. These officials couched it in confusing language, but it's clear what the administration was saying. More households of all incomes will be audited by the IRS with its new compliance funding, with each income group share of audits remaining roughly what it's been. Now, this is shocking, but let me give you some numbers here that he goes into. So what share of audits have typically been on Americans making under 400,000? Well, most of them. In 2018, the last year for which the IRS has released complete data, there were 367,369 audits of individual returns. Of these, 3.8% of the total were returns reporting no positive income. So these are people writing off every penny getting their audit. Okay? Households reporting between $1 and $25,000 in income received 52.9% of those audits. In income receiving up to $50,000 added an additional 19.9%. So income from basically $1 to $50,000 is about 70% of the audits. Does that sound like they're not going to audit the middle class? Very, very disappointing. Households making $75,000 to $100,000 were hit by 4.2% of the audits. Households with $100,000 to $200,000 income were subject to 7.3% of the audits. When you add it all up, more than 95% of all audits of individual returns have historically been of households with less than $200,000 in income, with 75% of those audits on those with less than $75,000 of income. Well, when you're wrong, and I was dramatically wrong there. That is the most horrendous thing I've ever seen. They're going to be people, as they're struggling to just make ends meet, as we've talked about in these videos, can't even pay their power bills. Now they got to worry about being audited. I mean, a guy making $75K, okay, let's say that he's taxed at 30%. That's about $22,000 in taxes before any write-offs. How much blood can you squeeze out of that stone compared to the guy making, $200 million a year, right? So, and they're getting 5% of the audits, and the guys making $75,000 or less are getting more than 70% of the audits. It's just an absolute abomination. I stand corrected. I'm not so big and strong that I can't admit it when I was wrong. This one was absolutely blown. You guys were right. I was wrong. Anyway, tomorrow's a very big day, guys. Tomorrow the Fed or St. Jerome of Jekyll Island will give his little speech at this Jackson Hole Symposium. All the world economic leaders and central bankers there in Jackson Hole for their annual, tax write-off party, festival, fancy feasting, and everything else. We'll see what the chairman has to say, and markets, I'm sure, we're going to be reacting according to what he's got. That's it for today, guys. I really appreciate your support. If you like what you're hearing, hit like. If you haven't already, subscribe. Double check your subscriptions. We know we're being purged by the YouTube guys right now, so double check, make sure your subscription's still there. Hit the bell to make sure you get your notifications. Of course, ask me your questions in comments. If you have a more in-depth question, ask Chuck Barone at gmail.com. And until we talk again tomorrow, guys, take care. Thank you.